Everyone, the event is now live. John, please take it away.
Thanks, Kishana. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the latest installment of our ongoing editorial webinar series, Coffee Talk. Each hour-long information-packed episode organized by the hardworking folks at Redmond Magazine features the observations and insights of an independent expert on a wide range of tech industry topics. Many thanks to the underwriting sponsor of this episode, Red Canary, a pioneer of managed detection and response to secure your endpoints, cloud, and whatever comes next. Without their support, this series would not be possible. And thanks to you for joining us. I'm John K. Waters, Editor-in-Chief of the Converge 360 Group of 1105 Media, and I'll be your moderator. Today's topic is, what's attacking your cloud? Top security threats to watch now. And our lead presenter is technologist, creator of compelling content, and senior resultant, Howard M. Cohen. But before we get started, just a bit of housekeeping. This episode is being recorded for later access. Keep an eye out for an email with a link to that recording. It'll be coming your way in the next few days. We'll make some time during the talk for questions. Please feel free to type your questions into the Q&A box at any time. We'll do our best to get to all of them. Our sponsor has provided some extra resources you won't want to miss. They're available now on your console. And as a small thank you to the 200 attendees who stick with us to the end, we'll be sending you a $5 gift certificate to Starbucks. It's a cup of joe to go with the info. Now let's meet our first presenter. Howard M. Cohen has spent more than 40 years in the IT industry. During that time, he has held senior executive positions in many of the top channel partner organizations, and he currently writes for and about IT and the IT channel. He is a sought-after speaker, an insightful observer of the technology landscape, and one of our favorite presenters. You guys are in for a great session. Take it away, Howard.
Thank you very much, John, and hello, everybody. Welcome to today's presentation about what's attacking your cloud. Those of you who have been at one of my sessions in the past know that I always like to start with a word of the day. And as you can probably surmise from the artwork, the word of the day today is abstraction. Abstraction. And you may be wondering, of course, what does abstraction have to do with the cloud? Well, if you go back to the original definition of cloud computing, produced and published by the National Institute of Standards and Technology, NIST, it talks about a layer of abstraction that must be created between the user and the underlying technology. Now, this is where the magic comes from, because the user doesn't know or care where everything is coming from. They just focus on and concentrate on doing their work. So the layer of abstraction is very important. Now, for those of you who have not read the definition of cloud computing, it's 4 pages. It's just 4 pages. You can get it from nist.gov. Just search on definition of cloud computing, and you will find it to be a very worthwhile read. It explains what cloud computing really is. In the meantime, what I think we ought to do is get real about cloud. Let's get real about cloud. You may remember back in the early days of cloud, there were these commercials on television about going to the cloud. Everything's in the cloud. And it was as if the cloud was this big, mystic, magical place where, all the magic took place. And the fact of the matter is, this is not what we're talking about when we say cloud. It doesn't look anything like that. Although marketers have worked really hard to plant that vision in our heads, the reality is when we talk about a cloud, it looks more like this. Yes, that's a data center. It's a very large data center. That is the Microsoft mega data center in Dublin, Ireland. And it's huge. As you can imagine, the inside looks kind of like this. Rows upon rows of servers and storage and routers and switches and things that go bump in the night. And they're all producing the cloud services that we see. So from now on, when I say cloud, I want you to think data center. But even more than that, I I want you to think somebody else's data center, not yours. Okay, cloud means somebody else's data center. So let's take a look at how clouds are being attacked. Okay, these data centers are under attack, and in many ways. But here's some stats. First of all, today, depending on whose survey you look at, between 3/4 and 92% of organizations consider themselves to be cloud first. That is to say, if they have something in their on-premise deployment, in their on-premise data center or network closet or what have you, they're not going to replace it anymore. They're going to replace it instead with a cloud service. So they now consider themselves to be cloud first. And it's not surprising that that gives rise to the fact that today, 45% of breaches, at least those that are reported, are cloud-based. People are attacking the cloud, not your on-premise data centers, because there's more people using the cloud, fewer people using on-premise data centers. So 45% next year, my bet is when we do a session like this next year, it'll be more like 2/3, maybe even more. This one's interesting to me. 1/3 of IT decision makers report facing challenges around cloud data privacy and security. My thinking is that the other 2/3 are wrong. they don't know, or they don't want to think, or they want to deny that they're facing challenges, because the proof is in the pudding. 80% of those companies have experienced at least one cloud security incident. It's already happened. So those that are saying they don't have any problems, they've had problems. And I guess the most important stat to recognize is that cloud exploitation in general has doubled over the past year. And I suspect that it's going to be more than doubling next year. So there is a problem. And it's a big problem, and it's a growing problem. When we ask, what are the primary challenges you face, for example, 85% of the people surveyed simply said security. That's our biggest problem. But there are other problems that contribute to the vulnerability of cloud. For example, lack of people. They don't have people to work on the security provisions for their cloud implementations. And given that the last time I looked, there were 4 million available jobs, open job recs for technology people, especially security, and almost 1 million of them are here in the United States, it's really no surprise they don't have people. They can't find them. 81 are concerned about their cloud spend, and there's no surprise there either. The fact is that all the big cloud providers are constantly changing the rates on their various services, and they have lots of services. The fact is, if you're paying X for a service from one of the big hyperscaler cloud providers, and then another one lowers their price below that, and your financial department checks that, that could be career altering. So you've got to constantly be looking at all of the different choices that you have in today's multi-cloud environment. That's why I've always recommended, if you're building a team to manage your cloud utilization, be sure to include a financial expert, a financial manager who can stay on top of that pricing, can stay on top of how well you are controlling your spend, not necessarily reducing it, but controlling it so that there's no wasted spend. Because remember, you still have people who request a resource, you pay for it as long as they're using it, they finish using it, and they don't release it. So as far as the system knows, they're still using it, they're still paying for it, you're still paying for it. You need to buckle down on that and make sure that people are releasing the resources they're finished using when they're finished using them. Governance got included in the list as way up there. People are using the cloud services available to them for the wrong reasons, or accessing the wrong data. There's all kinds of malfeasance going on. That has to be controlled as well. Here's a great one, managing software licenses. Here, it's a matter of onboarding and offboarding. Let's say that you onboard a few new people and you dutifully go out and subscribe for each of them to the cloud services you use. Now they all have their own subscriptions. Problem is, last month you offboarded a bunch of people. Either you offboarded them properly and now their subscriptions, their licenses are sitting idle and they could be moved to the new person, and therefore you're buying something you didn't need to buy because you could just use the existing one, or you didn't. You didn't remove their subscription and they're out there still using it, still accessing all of your cloud services. Talk about a security breach. That is more prevalent than you know, and it's absolutely avoidable with a good offboarding process. Compliance is also huge. And compliance, let's be very clear, compliance does not mean security. Compliance means following the rules set down by some regulatory agency that impact you, that you are liable for. You can be in full compliance and yet not be secure at all. Flip side, you can be as secure as possible and not be in compliance. They're two separate things. They need two separate teams and two separate approaches. Some people are still stuck getting to the cloud, moving their workloads from on-prem to the cloud. It's very easy to build terrible vulnerabilities in when you do it wrong. So it's important to either engage somebody to do it right, get a tool with which you can do it right, or just get somebody trained to do it right. Cloud migration is a big, big vulnerability. And now, of course, as I mentioned earlier, we are managing multi-cloud. Now, if you're out there and you're using a public cloud service and a private cloud service, congratulations, you are amongst those who are using hybrid cloud. That's all it takes. But if you are using a public cloud service from Amazon and another cloud service from Azure, and maybe even another from Google or somebody else, that's multi-cloud, using the same kind of service from multiple different providers. Same with private. If you're using private cloud services from more than one, then you are in a multi-cloud environment, and there's very good reason to be there. As I mentioned earlier, you can shop. They all provide hundreds, maybe even thousands of services now. And you can shop amongst them to see which one works best for you, which one is most cost-effective for you, and there's nothing stopping you from picking the one you want, no matter who it comes from. It's kind of like shopping at department stores. You can go from one to the next in your nearest mall. Well, it's the same is true in multi-cloud. You have choice. You have selection. Okay, so we've looked at the challenges people are facing. And by the way, with multi-cloud, you've also got multi-rules and multi-standards and multi-configurations and multi-idiosyncrasies. You've got to obey 3 different sets of rules if you're buying from all 3 of the big hyperscalers. And that means you have 3 consoles, and that's not easy to manage. It's much easier when you consolidate it down. So recognize that there are great advantages to multi-cloud, but there are also great exposures involved as well. To me, it all starts, the challenges begin with the absence of cloud policies. There are many people today who are using cloud, but have no cloud policies in place to govern how they're using cloud so that their users know what they can and cannot do and how to do the things they want to do. If you think about it, every security measure you've ever put in place had the same purpose, which is to enforce your security policy. Well, if you don't have any policy, then there's nothing to enforce. And that's why it's so crucial. It guides everything else you do to establish your cloud policies right up front. That's the best place to create new attacks, is to just not have policies in place. There are many kinds of attacks that cloud is not immune to. Okay, you may remember back in the earliest days of cloud, maybe a dozen years ago or more, everybody was afraid. Security isn't strong enough. There's no security in the cloud. I can't put my workloads out there. People will steal them and blah, blah, blah. Excuse me. By 2012, By 2012, a gentleman named Satya Nadella, who at that time was in charge of tools and systems at Microsoft, wasn't yet CEO, announced in a blog post, I believe, that 5 times more people feel safer in the cloud than on premises. 2012. This was the year that they announced Windows Server as the cloud operating system, the cloud OS. And they were right. All the surveys said people feel much more comfortable, much more secure in the cloud. And that's great. That means that the cloud data centers are doing their job. They're investing heavily and protecting themselves. And that is a huge advantage. So, okay, today, 11 years later, the cloud is even more secure. Cloud data centers are amongst the most secure data centers anywhere, because that's the business they're in. And they're all they all have very deep pockets, deeper than ours. So you can trust that. But there are some exploits that cloud is not immune to. For example, ransomware. Ransomware uses human engineering. It attacks the user, not the digital devices. And it gets the user to make a mistake, to click something they really shouldn't have clicked, or to open an attachment they really shouldn't have opened. And what happens then is that the clicking or the opening opens the floodgates to the cybercriminal. And they come right through your user's endpoint into the cloud system and start doing their worst. Which points out to us that it is your endpoint that is the most vulnerable point of entry into the system. So we have to really, really protect those endpoints. So ransomware, you've got to put as much protection in place. Yes, there's behavioral software that will spot people doing the things they shouldn't be doing. It helps. There are filters coming out that look for malformed URLs and whatnot. There's all kinds of stuff. But there's nothing right now that beats user training and ongoing user reorientation. That is crucial. Ransomware. Another one, just like it, malware. Not to say that the cloud providers don't have great malware protection. They do. They have great antivirus. They have great anti-spam, anti-malware, you name it. They don't have worms or Trojans coming in easily. That's for sure. And they're keeping every filter up to date, so they have all the most recent signatures before you do. But again, your endpoint may not have yesterday's signatures. This may be a 0 day for a new signature that just came out. Or there may be signatures out there that your particular protection doesn't protect against. You're more vulnerable than they are, and your endpoint is a doorway in. So you've got to really be paying attention to your malware strategy, your anti-malware strategy, sorry. So if we want to summarize what that all turns into, it really turns into cloud access, right? So we have identity and access management that we want to put in place. The user wants to authenticate themselves into the network, and then they get authorized to use specific resources. That's all great stuff. But the fact is that this is where most of the attackers are going to attack, because they want to gain access into the network. They want to gain access into the cloud services you're using. Your users, no offense here, your users are helping them, or at least some of them are. The most recent stats I've read, somewhere between 70 and 80% of users still use the word password as their password. That's right, password. Many are using the default password that came with whatever they're using. Others are using a spouse's name, a pet's name, somebody's birthday, something simple to guess. And therefore, cyber criminals have a pretty easy time getting in. Many of you have taken the strong step of requiring strong passwords. Bravo. And now they're combining capital letters with small case letters, numbers and special symbols and everything else, and creating long string passwords. And that's great. Of course, they can't remember them. And so what do? A lot of them still write that password down on a sticky note, and they stick it under their keyboard where nobody's going to find it. Unfortunately, you know as well as I do, somebody always does. Maybe the cleaning crew that's cleaning up your office after hours, or maybe other employees in your company who want to be able to get at things they should not get at without being detected. And that's what gives rise to insider threats. Insider threats are another thing that's attacking your cloud, but it's attacking your cloud from within your company. Now, some of it is innocent. For example, the first young lady there on the left is simply being careless. She may be one of those who wrote her password down on a sticky note, or she may have just entered something wrong. Or there's always ways to make mistakes. Everybody does. And that's got to be allowed for. But there are people who want to conduct industrial espionage or who want to steal data, and they're doing it purposefully. So you need to be very aware of that, and you need to protect against it internally. Part of that, get rid of those sticky notes. Require strong passwords and help them come up with a way of managing them without exposing them. Then there are data breaches. Of course, I love data breaches, and for some reason our bacon is not sizzling today. I apologize. I refer to data as the new bacon. Why? Because everybody loves bacon. And what's the only thing that's better than bacon? More bacon. The same thing is true of data. Okay, the only thing better than data is more data. And we prove that every day with the enormous volumes of data that we produce. So there are many ways in which data is breached. Some of them we've already talked about. Getting in through your endpoints one way or another will allow cybercriminals to get at your data in cloud storage. And they can encrypt it. They can steal it, exfiltrate it. They can corrupt it. There's all kinds of things they can do. The one thing you must do, even though it's in the cloud, is you must encrypt your data yourself. You must be encrypting your data, not only when it's in transit from one place to another, but when it's sitting there in storage in the cloud. And whatever you do, do not share your decryption key with your cloud providers. They don't need it. They are not interested in your data payload. They don't care. They should not have your decryption keys, because if the government decides to subpoena your data, they're going to just give it to them without hesitation. That's in your contract. You acknowledge that they will just answer a subpoena and give your data to them freely. If your data is encrypted, the government still has to come to you and let you know that they want your data. They can't do it behind your back. If you give them the key, they may surrender that as well. So again, protect yourself against data breaches with encryption at least, and way beyond that, protecting your endpoints. It may not be you that they decide to attack. They may decide to attack somebody else along your supply chain. For example, the shipping company you use to bring in and send out products, the manufacturers you use to create the products that you sell, your lawyer, your accountant, any business associate of yours has to be as secure as you are. There are some regulatory acts that require that. And the fact of the matter is you want that, because remember, a supply chain is a chain, and a chain is only as strong as its weakest link. So every link has to be as strong as possible. Otherwise, there's a doorway into your system, and they can compromise your data. We talked earlier, there goes the cloud. Now it's multi-cloud. We're now in a multi-cloud world. And as we discussed earlier, the more clouds you use, the more management responsibility you have, The more management responsibility you have, the more likely it is that you can make mistakes. And it goes back to the humans. You know, be prepared when you decide to go multi-cloud. Be well prepared to manage whatever it is you include and incorporate into your cloud system. Many experts tell me that misconfiguration is what they consider to be the most common source of exploits. And again, they're going back to the humans. You know, they put in the wrong IP address. They made the wrong settings. There's so many settings. There's so many different things that do have to be controlled. You want that controlled by your IT department, not by your users. Your users, the only thing they should confront is a self-service portal. That's also specified in the NIST definition of cloud computing. Okay, so you can prevent a lot of misconfiguration by giving your users as little to control as they possibly can, and keeping that control onto your IT people, and making sure your IT people know exactly how to operate each of the cloud services you engage. And here's one that I find mind-bending, which is the concept of the cloud attack surface. Back in the early days of LANs, local area networks, everybody was in the same building. Everybody was connected to the same cable or the same hub or concentrator, and that was your attack surface. And really, very few people could figure out how to get into it unless you had long lines out there, or you got connected to their new internet when it came out. Today, I challenge anybody to define their attack surface. And the reality is, the internet becomes our attack surface. You know, the same way that they can get in through your supply chain, they may be able to find a way in through your connections across the internet. The edge has become part of your attack surface. If you've got sensors or switches or any other kind of controls out there that you're using IoT to manage, most of those are pretty shabby devices. They're not very well protected, and they are a vulnerability through which smart cyber criminals can enter into your network. So again, it's a good idea to really put some thought and some time into figuring out what is your attack surface, because the more time you spend on it, the more things you're going to find you reveal, you surface, that emerge for you. It's like almost a never-ending challenge to figure out what is your attack surface. Some of the old-time attacks are still out there, and they're still doing their job. Denial of service is a perfect example. Many of you may have heard this referred to as distributed denial of service, which is more common. A DDoS, a distributed denial of service, involves a cyber criminal enlisting the help of hundreds, thousands, how many ever they can get their hands on, of hosts, people's computers, and have them all make requests of your targeted server at the same time. They can do that with a cloud server just as easily as they can do it with an on-premises server. And so when all of those hosts are making their requests at the same time, there's a certain capacity of requests your cloud servers can handle. And when that's exceeded, they shut down. And that means that your people and your customers can't access that service. It's a denial of service. They can't get there. Okay, so I talked before about policy. That's one of the two primary issues we're concerned about. But on a day-to-day operating basis, I'm going to leave you with this thought. Your biggest concern is visibility. I live in Arizona. We have a very long monsoon season. During our monsoon season, what you see there now is considered great visibility. It's almost impossible to see your nose in front of your face. And from a networking perspective, it is crucial that you're able to clearly see everything, every user, every device, every application, everything that's happening, every connection, you name it, every cloud. You need to be able to see them on your management console. You need to have thresholds set that will alert you when something exceeds what it's supposed to be doing. That is critical to your ability to effectively manage and secure the network through which you communicate with your cloud services. And anything and everything you can do must be focused on gaining that visibility. Whenever you assess tools to be using with the cloud, always think visibility. Think, does it help me see everything I need to see? And with that, I'm going to thank you for your attention. Hope it was helpful. And John, do we have any questions?
We do indeed. Thank you, Howard. I want to remind everyone that you can type your questions into the Q&A box at any time. We'll do our best to get to all of them. Pardon me. So let's start with a question from our...
Is Lynn out there?
Yes, Lynn is. Always has great questions and our favorite attendee. So we're going to start with that. Lynn is wondering: threat actors. Whoops, it slipped away from me. Threat actors are continually evolving their tactics. What are some of the emerging or evolving cloud security threats that organizations should be aware of and prepared to defend against?
Actually, Lynn, it sounds like you didn't watch my presentation this time. That's exactly what we've been talking about. The fact is that, yes, they've been evolving their tactics, but at a given point, I guess it's the categories of attack that just aren't changing anymore. We're not seeing, we're seeing viruses, new virus signatures. We're seeing new Trojans and worms and all kinds of stuff like that. We're seeing new ways to do DDoS attacks. But the categories themselves, I don't see growth there anymore. And so it's really a matter of selecting the right providers to help you with the software that you use and the strategies that you use to be prepared to defend against them.
Okay, we had a comment there. How about this one from Shauna, who's wondering, Howard, isn't it true that you need to be concerned about everybody else who's in the same cloud as you? I think that refers to your presentation as well.
It does, but it is something that I really didn't talk about much. Before there was cloud, there was an initiative called ASP, which was Application Service Provider, which fell like a lead donut. It was a horrible failure, and a lot of people are still financially recovering from it, even though it was 20 years ago. The idea was to have the server for your application reside in somebody else's data center. Sound familiar? The problem was that the customer ended up, no matter what, paying for the server, no matter where it was. And now they were paying for communication service to get to the server, which was somewhere else. So they got an advantage in rapid response on problems, but it was a much more expensive proposition. That changed when virtualization was introduced. Now, all of a sudden, dozens of customers could share the same server, and they were each paying a fraction of what it cost to have and to operate that server. That's what really launched the cloud, was server virtualization. Today, we talk about the multiple companies that are sharing a physical server using multiple instances of the virtual server. We refer to them as tenants. And everybody is always concerned that data from one tenant could be accessed by another tenant because they're in the same piece of hardware. And I guess physically, if you imagine that, it looks like it, very possible. I still read from time to time people saying that, as far as they can tell, that has never happened. Data has never leaked from one tenant to another tenant. Honestly, I can't assure you that that's true. I have not done that research. I have not gone out. I don't know that they have. I hope they have. But the point is that it's so infrequent as to be almost not to worry about. And honestly, if you are worried about it, encrypt your data. If your data is encrypted, as much of it can leak as happens, and nobody can use it. So If there is a problem, there's a solution. If there isn't a problem, there isn't a problem.
Okay, you know what? That's all the time we have for questions for this part of our presentation today. Thank you, Howard. I want to move on and introduce our guest speaker, Kevin Gee, Senior Product Marketing Manager at Red Canary. Kevin started his career in the IT industry more than a decade ago as a jack-of-all-trade systems administrator, but soon moved into the cloud and cybersecurity space. He now serves as the technical expert on the company's product marketing team focused on technical integrations and partnerships. You're in for another great session. Take it away, Kevin.
Awesome. Thank you, John. And thank you, everybody, for attending and staying till the end. Just like John kind of said, most of my focus currently at Red Canary is on the cloud. I also do a little bit focusing on some of our ROI and business value messaging, and then a lot on the competitive intel. Previously, I came from a cloud access security broker where I was one of our technical marketing engineers. And just a bit of personal about me, I am an avid golfer. So if I'm not working, I'm probably on the golf course working on my game, trying to get to scratch if I can. So I'm going to try to keep this kind of like high level, light and brief, and just kind of talk about Red Canary as a whole here for a second before kind of diving into what we do for the cloud and stuff like that. So Red Canary, one of our main aims is to really kind of be the center of our customer security operations. So regardless of the size of your organization, whether you're a smaller org where you don't necessarily have the resources or budget to build out a internal SOC, we could be there to help you to kind of supplement all of that, integrate with, the cybersecurity tools that you've already invested in, and help you to provide that sort of expertise and knowledge to kind of cross those gaps that you might not have in order to help you kind of operationalize those tools and help you kind of detect and respond to the threats that you might be facing. Similarly, whether you're a medium-sized org or a large org and you already have a built-out internal SOC and stuff like that, we could still help you supplement. We provide a wealth of threat intel and research where we're coming up with our own detectors across the wide gamut of your attack surface, and could help you kind of provide that second set of eyes and maybe that second set of knowledge there to, again, help you be a little bit more efficient to make sure that we are identifying things well before they become a problem and being able to stop those as they happen. So as you can see here, we do provide quite a host of services, across your entire attack surface, whether it's endpoint, networks, cloud, identities, SaaS, and everything in between. So we do really want to stress that, regardless of what your attack or what your environment looks like, we have ways to help you integrate with all those tools. And best of all, when you use a service like Red Canary or any other MDR, one of the benefits, and I think Howard stressed that with the sort of visibility piece, is that tools alone are only sort of looking within their kind of isolated realm. Right, you have your EDR tools just kind of looking at the endpoint data, or your identity tools like Okta just looking at a user's login. But really what it takes to identify certain types of threats is that combination of data and being able to correlate things across all of your tools. Right, it's very difficult to identify something and determine whether it's a false positive or something real, and then how do you act on that? And if it is a false positive and you start acting on it, you might be more disruptive than a real threat might have been down the line by potentially shutting users out of legitimate access or thinking that certain type of behaviors are incorrect when it's really somebody trying to get work done at the last minute. So it does take a combination of looking at data, right? Looking at suspicious user logins, and then what a user might be doing after the fact within that cloud environment or SaaS app or whatever it might be, and matching all that data up to actually determine, hey, this is a real threat and we need to act on this sooner rather than later. So jumping more into sort of the cloud things, what are the goals and stuff like that? And I think Howard laid out a lot of this already, and so this is almost kind of preaching to the choir here. But really the goal remains the same. It is gain access to your cloud system somehow, typically through compromising a user's credentials, and then using that access to make money off of you. And that typically revolves around some sort of data theft and exfiltration and then selling it down the line, or gaining access to that data, extracting it, and then ransoming it back to you. Or, typical ransomware where they encrypt it and lock you out of your systems and so forth. We have seen, very minorly, maybe people trying to use your resources for crypto mining and stuff like that. But I think those are more edge cases, kind of niche things. But really, it's all about the data, because that's where the money is going to be, is getting access to that data and then making money off of it. Pretty simple. So what does that sort of attack look like? And again, I think Howard did a really good job of laying this out. When you think about endpoint threats or like firewall threats or like your network threats, and they all have these like fancy names for all the different ransomwares. You have your QBots and your Chrome loaders and Mimikatz and all these things. Really, when it comes down to cloud and SaaS altogether, it's really very basic, and it's just stuff that we've been dealing with ever since technology existed, which is ways of getting access to your system, which is typically through social engineering, brute force attacks, key loggers, and then the sort of misconfigurations and stuff. So within that sort of attack pattern, once they gain access to your systems, they're going to be performing, a series of activities in order to identify where the data is, and then performing actions to make sure that they maintain access to those systems and then extract all of that data. So what Red Canary does is really kind of focus on the early parts of that in order to prevent the bad things from happening, right? We're looking at those initial access attempts, the sort of activity that they're doing once they get in, matching up that behavior with the suspicious logins, looking for lateral movement, escalating their privileges, making security changes, all of those kind of suspicious things. Make sure we identify that first, verify that it is a threat and not a normal user's kind of behavior, and make sure that we stop it before you get to the point of no return, which is they have already extracted your data, and now it's more about the cleanup than it is about the prevention. So we're really trying to make sure that we could help you identify and stop those threats well before we get to that point. So what does those initial access attempts really look like? And again, Howard laid this out very well. It's through social engineering and phishing attempts. Within the cloud, you have a lot of cloud token theft, right? Intercepting somebody's existing session to mimic logging in as them, even if you never got their actual login credentials to begin with. Exploitation of public-facing applications and systems. So people using public Wi-Fi or public-facing computer systems and stuff like that, and logging in somewhere on those compromised machines. And then, maybe some sort of supply chain attacks and stuff like that, intercepting things that are in between, or developer-based attacks where you are compromising things that developers might be downloading off of GitHub or GitLab and stuff like that, and using internally for testing purposes or whatnot. And then the other major one we see is a lot of that sort of user accidents, right? Admins setting policies up incorrectly, all of those system misconfiguration. Oops, I left my S3 bucket exposed to the public when really I thought it was locked down to private and only certain users. And then somebody figures that out, and then they have unfettered access to your data, things of that nature. So Red Canary, where do we step in here for the cloud? Again, I kind of mentioned it before. We help you kind of monitor your control plane and runtime across your entire cloud environment. We tie into all of those, cloud providers and different sorts of resources in order to ingest that log data, that raw event log data, as well as the alerts that they're generating. And we help to correlate all that information with whatever tools that you're using. So not to say, hey, use Red Canary and buy us and connect every single tool. But again, the more tools that we have, the more visibility we have, and the more that we could kind of make sense of what's going on in your environment to help you. We have our own threat intel and research team that's constantly staying on top of the latest kind of tactics and techniques that are being used out there but we also benefit from our customers as well. So we have a wide range of customers across a number of different industries and different sizes and all that. And we could see the type of attacks that are unique to each of those industries and the things that our customers are experiencing, and use that to help leverage our own threat intel and build out our own detectors to make sure that we're seeing everything that our entire customer base can see, and what you guys might be seeing that might be unique to you within whatever industry you're in. And then again, we provide that sort of threat investigation. We have a team of people there who are constantly monitoring your environment, making sure that we identify that stuff, and then being able to respond, whether it's through our automated playbooks or through guided remediation, where we have proactive security experts there to help kind of walk you through or be a little bit more hands-on as needed. So just kind of finishing up here, not going to read through this whole thing, but again, we kind of integrate with a number of kind of cloud providers and cloud systems out there to help you kind of just integrate with all of your data and be able to help you detect and stop things well before they become a problem. Again, I want to thank everybody here for their time. It looks like most of you actually all stayed to the end. So I'm very, very appreciative. And I will open it up to questions. You will also see a poll popping up. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, let them know about the poll.
Yeah, so go ahead and answer this poll while you guys are typing in any questions you might have for me as well. And yeah, again, just kind of thank you for your time.
Yeah, guys, give us your 2 cents on this poll. And remember, you can type your questions into the Q&A box at any time. We'll do our best to get to all of them. Let's start with this one here. Kevin, when you talk about, quote, cloud protection, end quote, what exactly are you covering?
Yeah, good question. So I kind of skimmed over it a little bit at the end, but we are basically covering both the control plane. So you can think of the control plane as the IaaS environment kind of control console itself that kind of controls everything that you're doing, where you're setting up all of your policies, you're spinning up all of the other resources underneath it and all of your VMs and everything like that you might be building in there, your S3 buckets or what have you. So we tie directly into AWS and GCP currently. We are working to add Azure very, very soon, hopefully by the end of the year, to kind of cover all three from a direct integration standpoint into those control planes. So we'll ingest all of the raw event log data that's coming from them, as well as the alerts that those generate. So Amazon, CloudTrail, as well as GuardDuty, their own alert system. Same thing with GCP audit logs and so forth. And then we'll do the same with Azure. We also have our own Linux EDR endpoint system for Linux-based systems. So if you've spun up your own production environment in AWS or GCP or wherever, and you want that sort of runtime protection on a production environment or testing environment bed that you might be using for, maybe you are a cloud-based company with your own SaaS offering or something like that. We do have a Linux-based offering that integrates with those, where we could do that sort of runtime protection over those applications as well. And then we integrate with a number of third-party partners. So similarly, like CrowdStrike has one, SentinelOne has one, and so forth. Like if those companies have Linux-based offerings that you're using as well, we could tie into those. We also partner with Lacework. So everything that Lacework does within their overall cloud security portfolio, we integrate with them as well, ingest their alerts, and could kind of provide additional context there. And then we're working on more partnerships. Soon we'll be trying to announce a partnership with Wiz as well that we're kind of building out. So we're kind of covering that entirety of the cloud, whether it's on the control plane or some of those runtime instances that you're building up.
Okay, fascinating. So here's another question. Earlier, you showed a slide with your overall coverage. Is that default within your normal service offering, or then there's a question mark?
Yeah, good question.
So, okay.
Yeah. So this is kind of more of maybe like a licensing style question, but it is kind of good context to understand. So we do kind of, like I said, we run the gamut across like your entire environment. We're trying to make it very simple for our customers and prospects to kind of understand how that's kind of broken down. So you could purchase, altogether a license that would cover everything. But we do understand that, especially with new customers, you might be very focused on one specific area, whether it's endpoints or cloud or user. So we have released kind of like broken things down into individual bundles with their own kind of SKUs below them. So you could go kind of piecemeal where you're saying, hey, I just want to protect this one individual thing, whether it's identity or maybe one specific cloud resource. You could do that if you're just kind of curious about like, hey, maybe I just kind of want to dip my toes into the MDR market. You're not entirely sure what MDRs do for Red Canary or how we help, and you just kind of want to get that sort of intro feel. We do have that, or we do kind of bundle things together. So for endpoint, we're looking at like your EDR data, and we're also attaching kind of that network and firewall integrations as well, because they kind of go hand in hand, and a lot of that information is tied together and correlated. So we have like a endpoint bundle for that. We have a cloud bundle that is specifically focused across, your IaaS environments, which no matter which one they are, and that'll include all of our third-party like integrations with like Lacework, Wiz, and so forth, and Linux as well. And then we have a user SaaS bundle that'll focus primarily on identity and, your email systems like business email compromise type of things, as well as individual SaaS apps. So you could get like an overarching bundle that encompasses everything, or within those individual categories, depending on what your existing need is, to make sure that we're covering you as best as you want us to.
So it looks like that's all the questions we have, but I know there it is. I was going to ask if you could put up the info slide. Tell people where they can get more information.
Yeah, absolutely. So, feel free to reach out to us, reach out to me. I think my email might be on the webinar sign up, but go to redcanary.com, our website. There's plenty of great information there. If you're looking to schedule a demo or talk to one of our sales reps and SCs and just kind of learn a little bit more, go to redcanary.com/demo. We also provided a number of resources in here, including our recent kind of cloud bundle white paper. So if you want a little bit more information, when I started talking about those bundles, exactly what the cloud bundle is, what we're focused on, it'll kind of highlight some of those same challenges that we talked about today and how you can address them yourselves and the type of things that you would need to do. And then as well as what Red Canary kind of does to help out. But yeah, feel free to reach out. I would also kind of recommend redcanary.com/blog. A lot of our resources page and our blogs has a lot of good information, including a monthly sort of basically a kind of threat update to kind of tell you like intelligence insights, the type of threats that we're seeing, what's being prioritized on any given month and stuff like that. Just kind of like a lot of good information. I know Lynn asked kind of what are some of the newest threats and stuff like that. So that is a pretty good resource to kind of see, hey, what are some of the new things that are coming out, or what are the trends that we're seeing on a month-to-month basis and how they're prioritized and stuff like that. So, yep.
Thanks, Kevin. Guys, be sure to check out those resources. I've read the blog; it's awesome. So, highly recommended. Okay, that's it. Well, that's all the time we have for this episode of Coffee Talk. Two great presentations. Thank you, Howard, for an awesome and insightful presentation, as always. And Kevin G., thank you for joining us on this informative episode. And a special thanks to Red Canary for sponsoring us. We couldn't have done it without you folks. Thanks a million. Keep an eye out for our next episode and for your Starbucks gift card. It should be coming your way in the next few days. And be sure to visit our new YouTube channel, Converge 360, where you'll find plenty of great interviews, insights, and information from our editors. Thanks, everyone, and have a great day.